Oh, come on now, Sugar Puss. Leave us not get all excited. Let Chuck fix it all up, and I'll phone you back. Yeah, I said I'd fix it all up.
Excuse me, Charles. I'd like to get upstairs.
So long, Angel Puss. I'll call you back shortly.
Charles, why must you drape yourself all over the stairs when you're phoning? There's a chair at the telephone stand.
Oh, it's more comfortable here. I can stretch my legs out. Say, Mom, how's chances of using the car tonight?
Charles, I said I'd like to get upstairs.
No, sorry.
Doesn't it occur to you that your parents might like the car occasionally? Now, where are the shorts that need buttons, Charles?
Oh, they're in there. Hey, look out you don't step on that jive.
Oh, really, Charles? Records on the floor and skis on the bed.
I got 'em out to wax 'em. Hey, Mom, how about the car?
We'll discuss that later. Now, there are probably some things to mend over here in this closet. Oh, Charles! Oh, this is too much. This closet will have
I'll
to be...
leave it there, Mom. I'll clean it out later. Hey, Mom, do you suppose I could have the car?
That poor woman is probably hoping that adolescence is only a short-lived disease, or maybe it's just yours truly who is disease-minded. I have a reason for being this way. You see, our science reporter, Emerson Markham, says this excursion in science will be concerned with diseases of metal. It sounds as though we might be going to find out about aluminum measles or iron mumps. But here's our science reporter. Let's have him spread some light around here.
Thank you, Bob Stone, and how do you do, everyone? Indeed, we won't be discussing iron mumps or aluminum measles either, for that matter, Bob. I became acquainted with the various diseases peculiar to metals through an interview with Dr. Robert S. Williams, who was head of the Department of Metallurgy at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Williams is also a member of the War Metallurgy Committee and a metallurgical advisor to the Quartermaster General.
Well, I'm not surprised, then, that he'd be very well acquainted with items that aren't up to par, metallurgically speaking. But it's quite difficult for me to think of metals in terms of disease, even so.
Oh, that's understandable, Bob. Most people think of metals as being cold and unresponsive. And yet they are really so much like human beings that many of the terms we use about each other are well recognized in metallurgy.
Just what terms? Cite a few examples, please.
Well, metals may be hard or soft, strong or weak, tough or tender. They get tired and have their diseases, and often, like human beings, they do the unexpected.
Such as?
Well, take iron, for example. At a temperature of about 1650 degrees Fahrenheit, it is said to be reborn as a wholly new kind of metal is formed. It is no longer stiff and magnetic, but becomes much softer and is non-magnetic. And then, too, certain metals grow to a considerable extent, sometimes to an alarming degree.
Come now, Emerson. Metals grow?
Yes, some varieties of cast iron, for example, will, under special circumstances, grow as much as 30% and become quite useless for the purpose for which they were originally intended. Now, another very human characteristic of most metals is that they creep slowly over long periods of time. On some of the ancient cathedrals of Europe, the lead roofing has crept so much that the eaves have been completely covered. Very fortunately, most metals do not creep until the temperature is considerably above normal, but with the ever-increasing use of higher and higher operating temperatures, creep becomes a matter of vital importance.
Well, it isn't so surprising that with all of those almost human properties, metals should be subject to diseases of various kinds.
Yes, and it's here that catalysts come in, Bob.
Before you tell us what they have to do with our story, would you mind telling us just what the catalysts are, Emerson?
Certain finely divided metals are known as catalysts. In general, a positive catalyst may be thought of as a material which causes a chemical reaction to go much more rapidly than usual without itself taking part in the reaction. Familiar examples are found in the little mass of spongy metal used in a cigar lighter, which glows brightly when a combustible vapor is passed through it, or the gas lighter that starts a flame in a gas stove simply by holding it for a moment in the escaping gas from the burner. Metal catalysts are used not merely for these relatively unimportant purposes, but are being applied to an enormous and an ever-increasing extent in many of the large chemical industries.
And what does this have to do with diseases of metals, Emerson?
The cracking of petroleum to make high-test gasoline is an important illustration of a catalytic reaction. Here the human characteristics of metals become evident, as these catalysts may be poisoned by many of the poisons that affect humans. Fortunately, the metal catalysts are seldom killed by poison, but are made inactive and useless until a suitable remedy is found to restore them to health and to activity.
Seems to me we've been pretty general up to now. How about telling about some specific diseases, Emerson?
Well, tin is a metal that for many years has been known to suffer from a malady always referred to as the tin pest or tin disease.
What sort of a thing is it?
At a definite low temperature, tin changes from its bright and malleable form into a dull gray powdery mass that has none of the properties of the tin our tin contains. Now this temperature, Dr. Williams told me, is often reached on a cold winter day. But luckily for us all, the change takes place so slowly that no apparent damage is done unless the tin is exposed for long periods of time to temperatures far lower than can be reached except by artificial means. But again, showing its similarity to humans, the white tin can be vaccinated or inoculated by gray tin, and will change quickly to the useless form, even at temperatures often experienced in cold weather.
That's very interesting, Emerson. What other diseases are there?
While fatigue is perhaps most often thought of as a condition, it seems increasingly true that the physician is including it as a disease from which many men have suffered and broken mentally and physically. The metallurgist thinks of the fatigue of metals as one of the most serious diseases that can happen.
Is fatigue a very common affliction?
Oh, it's been estimated that 80 or 90% of the breakage of metal parts in automobiles, such as crankshafts and axles, are directly traceable to fatigue. The unfortunate part is that the disease is a most insidious one and progresses so slowly that it may be months or years before breakage occurs. For this reason, fatigue failures are often called progressive fractures.
What causes fatigue, Emerson? Too much work?
Fatigue of metals doesn't take place as the result of a steadily applied pull, but only if the load is alternately applied and removed, as it is in a rotating axle or in the rapidly moving connecting rod of a locomotive or an automobile engine.
How can you tell metal is fatigued?
Well, anyone who has worked with metals is quite familiar with the appearance of a fatigued brake. A broken rail or an axle, if examined soon after the break has happened, will show a bright smooth spot, generally almost circular in shape, and next to this spot, an area in which crystal faces are clearly evident. The layman says at once that the metal has crystallized.
Has it?
No. All metals except mercury are crystalline, and even that becomes crystalline at a temperature low enough to change it from a liquid to a solid. The smooth spot on the broken surface is not due even to a difference in the sizes of the crystals. It might be thought that the spot indicated small grains and the visible crystalline surface was made of large grains. If the surface is carefully polished with a fine abrasive material so that less than a hair's breadth of metal is removed, it will be found that the grain size is the same over the entire surface, and no trace of a smooth spot as distinguished from a rough spot is left.
Well, tell us, Emerson, what really happens then?
A very slight defect, not visible to the naked eye, exists on the original metal. This may be a tiny scratch or a tool mark. When the load is applied in one direction, the little crack is opened ever so slightly, to be closed again when the force is operating in the other direction. The repeated opening and closing of the little mouth causes a polishing action to take place, and as the crack grows deeper and deeper, its faces become more highly polished, you see. Well, ultimately, the crack increases to such a depth that the yet undamaged section is no longer thick enough to carry the load, and the part breaks suddenly. The crystalline appearance is associated with the sudden fracture, and the smooth spot is only the polished surface.
I see. Well, how do they go about preventing this fatigue?
Sometimes a different metal may be used, as metals differ rather widely in their susceptibility. For the most part, though, fatigue is prevented, or at least greatly decreased, by methods of manufacture or design. The part may be highly polished, and in this way, the input of the crack may be eliminated. The designer also has a great responsibility in this connection. He must, so far as the operation of the part permits, avoid notches, sharp-edged grooves, angles, and the like, all of which have a decidedly harmful effect.
What's the most dangerous disease that can befall metals, Emerson?
Dr. Williams says that corrosion is by far the most costly and the most dangerous, Bob. Various attempts have been made to estimate losses due to corrosion in a single year. And while the estimates vary widely, the figures are at least in the billions of dollars. A conservative figure is $2 or $3 billion a year. And estimates as high as $10 billion have been made.
It is very costly, then. I suppose rusting is one form of corrosion metallurgists have to provide against.
There are many types of corrosion. The least dangerous kind is general corrosion, in which the metal surface is gradually and uniformly eaten away. If the rate is known, it is only necessary to increase the thickness of the original piece so that after a predetermined period of years there will be enough good metal to do its job in spite of the loss of the metal from the surface.
You said there were many types. What are some of the others?
Well, a far more disturbing variety is the selective or pitting type. Here the corrosion blotches, instead of growing laterally and finally covering the metal with a continuous coat, work in from the surface to form pits, which often lead to a series of holes through the tube or the plate.
They've found some remedies, though, haven't they? I mean, stainless steel, for instance?
Stainless or rustless steel marks a long forward step, Bob, but is by no means a complete cure for all corrosion troubles. In the short time we've had to discuss metals and their diseases here, I hope I have been able to get across Dr. Williams' point that the metals are temperamental and they should be used properly. Their weaknesses, as well as their amazing strength, should be remembered. If they are not abused, they will continue to serve in the forefront of civilization.
Indeed you have, Emerson, and our thanks to you and Dr. Williams for broadening our knowledge in the field of metallurgy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to have a copy of a paper on metals and their diseases, a paper which includes many more facts than we've had time to bring you here, all you have to do to get your copies, address your request to Excursions in Science in care of the station to which you are now listening, asking for scientific paper number 187, entitled Diseases of Metals. That's Diseases of Metals, scientific paper number 187. And now once again it's question and answer time. The questions you're about to hear, ladies and gentlemen, have been sent in by people like ourselves, laymen with an active scientific curiosity. The answers they will receive reflect the best obtainable information, since they are based on facts provided by staff members of the General Electric Research Laboratory or of other equally reliable sources. Okay, Emerson, let's start off with this one. It comes from a young lady who would like to know how snowfall measurements are made for the official record.
There are two measurements made in connection with snowfall, Bob. One is the depth of snow which has fallen, and the other is the water equivalent of snowfall. There are various methods used to measure both. The simplest and most popular is the use of a measuring rod. This rod is used to measure the snow which has fallen on flat surfaces. And then, too, a snow table is also used.
What's a snow table like?
A snow table is similar to an ordinary packing box, and it is calibrated so that it collects the falling snow and measures its depth at the same time. Likewise, the rod is used to measure the snow which collects in the box.
Didn't you say something about the melted snow, too?
Yes, that's the other method. Snow is also measured in terms of melted water. After the snow is collected, it is melted and poured into a calibrated measuring cylinder and measured with a standard snow gauge. It so happens that it is more difficult to measure the depth of snow than it is rain, principally because of wind disturbances. And so it is necessary to find a place where the depth hasn't been changed by drifting snow. For this reason, it's customary to measure the depth at 3 or 4 different places which seem to be free as possible from drifting, and then take the average. The depth, incidentally, is ordinarily recorded to the 10th of an inch.
This next letter comes from a gentleman who says he recently had the idea of using an old storage battery as a photographic developing tank. He says he washed the battery case thoroughly with water, but is now wondering how to remove all traces of sulfuric acid which may be present. He wants to know if there's anything you can use to neutralize the residue.
Well, there are several things he might. He could first wash out the case again with a solution of bicarbonate of soda. That's ordinary baking soda. Or he could use distilled water in the case, allowing it to soak for a long time. And then, too, he might cover the inside of the battery with a thin layer of paraffin. Now, any of these methods should protect the battery from the acid so that it may safely be used for our friend's purpose.
This next young lady writes, if I am not mistaken, Einstein states in his theory of relativity that a curved line is the shortest distance between any 2 points. In plane geometry, we learned a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Are both theories correct, or is each one applicable in only a few specific cases?
Well, in the Euclidean geometry, a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. But when curved space is involved, as in Einstein's theory, the shortest line becomes a curve, just as the shortest line between any 2 points on the Earth's surface is a great circle.
Well, straight or curved, we'd better start making a beeline for the door. In other words, our time is just about up. So I'll say thank you, Emerson Markham, and goodbye, everyone, until our next Excursion in Science.